"Don't catch feelings," he said, as if I hadn't already. I still remember the first time he said it. "Don't catch feelings," he warned, with that easy grin that never quite reached his eyes, as if feelings were something you could avoid, as if love was a storm you could sidestep if you just carried the right umbrella. But the truth is, by the time he said those words, I had already caught them. I was drowning in them, actually, and maybe that was the cruelest part. He was telling me not to do something I had already done. It started in the most ordinary way. We weren't supposed to be anything more than friends. Just two guys who found each other at the right time, or maybe the wrong one, depending on how you look at it. We met through mutual friends. A casual night out. Drinks, laughter, stories that stretched too long because neither of us wanted to go home yet. From the beginning, there was this current running between us, something I pretended not to notice, but that tugged at me all the same. He was the kind of guy who walked into a room and made everyone's mood lift without even trying. Not because he was loud or flashy, but because he carried himself like the world was a little lighter when he was in it. And me? I was the guy who noticed him. Always noticed him. First, it was harmless. A few late-night texts, a couple of inside jokes. The kind of friendship that gets under your skin because it feels so natural, so easy. But easy things have a way of becoming complicated if you let them go on long enough. I remember the first time he stayed over. It wasn't anything dramatic. No storm outside. No reason we couldn't have just gone our separate ways. We had been watching movies, it got late, and I offered him the couch. He accepted. But somehow, the couch turned into us sitting there talking until 3 a.m., our voices quieter and softer as the night stretched on. Eventually, without really meaning to, I let my head fall against his shoulder. And he didn't move away. That was the moment I should have known. Because when he didn't move, when he just let me stay there, I felt it. The ground shifting. The rules of friendship bending. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't even touch beyond that. But when he finally did drift off, his head tilted slightly against mine, I couldn't sleep. My chest felt too tight, my thoughts too loud. And in the middle of it all, there was this sharp, undeniable realization. I wanted more. The thing about wanting more from someone who only offers you half is that it eats you alive in silence. We slipped into this rhythm, this strange in-between. We weren't together, not really. But we weren't just friends either. He would text me every day, sometimes good morning, sometimes nothing more than a meme that reminded him of me. He'd call when he was drunk and laugh at things that weren't really funny, just because I was the one on the other end of the line. He'd linger when we hugged, like he didn't really want to let go. And I fed on those moments. I let them convince me that maybe he wanted the same thing I did. That maybe if I was patient enough, brave enough, he would admit it. But then, one night, he said it. The line I would replay in my head for months. "Don't catch feelings." He laughed, nudging me like it was all a joke. And I laughed too. I pretended like it was funny. Like my heart didn't just sink to the floor. Like I hadn't already been holding on to feelings so tightly that my knuckles were white. The thing is, he wasn't cruel. He wasn't manipulative. He was scared. I could see it in the way his eyes darted away when our hands brushed. In the way he avoided certain words, certain moments, like they were traps he didn't want to fall into. I don't know if he was scared of me, or of himself, or of the world outside of us. Maybe all three. But what I do know is that his fear didn't stop me from loving him. It only made me love him harder, as if my love could protect us both. And so I stayed. I stayed when he called me late at night because he couldn't sleep. I stayed when he wanted to come over and collapse on my couch after a long week. I stayed when he let his head fall into my lap, eyes closed, trusting me in ways he never said out loud. I stayed even though every moment chipped away at me. People like to say unrequited love is romantic, noble even. But let me tell you, it doesn't feel noble. It feels like suffocating with a smile on your face. Like swallowing down words you want to scream just to keep someone close. And yet, I couldn't walk away. Not then. Because for all the pain, there was also joy. Real joy. The kind of joy that comes when someone knows you better than anyone else. When someone chooses you, even if only halfway. I kept telling myself maybe that was enough. That having part of him was better than having none of him. That maybe, just maybe, Someday he'd stop fighting himself and let me in fully. But deep down, I think I always knew. Knew that the story wouldn't end the way I wanted it to. Knew that don't catch feelings wasn't just a warning. It was a boundary. One he wasn't willing to cross, no matter how badly I wished he would. Still, I stayed. Still, I loved him. Still, I let myself hope. And hope, that was the most dangerous part of all. Because hope can keep you alive. But it can also kill you slowly. Hope was what made me answer every text within seconds, no matter what I was doing. Hope was what made my heart race when his name lit up my phone in the middle of the night. Hope was what made me believe that when he laughed at something I said, it wasn't just because it was funny, but because I was the one who said it. Hope is dangerous, because it turns scraps into feasts, half smiles into confessions, and fleeting moments into promises that were never actually made. I think the moment I realized just how deep I was in was the night of his birthday. We were out with a group of friends, crowded into a noisy bar that smelled like beer and cheap perfume. Music thudded through the walls, everyone was laughing too loud, and he was glowing. He always did on nights like that, the center of attention without even trying. But for once, he wasn't looking at everyone else. He was looking at me. Every time I caught his eye across the room, there it was. That look. The kind that made me feel like I was the only person there who really mattered. And then, when he leaned down to say something only I could hear, his breath warm against my ear, I swear the world tilted. "Glad you're here," he murmured. That's all it was. 3 simple words. But I carried them like they were holy. Later that night, when everyone else had gone home or passed out on couches, it was just us. We sat on the floor of his apartment, eating leftover pizza straight from the box. He was tipsy, leaning heavily against me, his head on my shoulder. I wanted to kiss him so badly it ached. But I didn't, because of those 4 words he'd said weeks before. Don't catch feelings. So instead, I just sat there. Let him lean on me. Let myself believe, for one fragile moment, that maybe I was what he wanted after all. But reality always comes back. A week later, he hooked up with someone else. Someone who wasn't me. He told me about it casually, like it was nothing. Like I was just his buddy, his confidant, the guy he could tell anything to. And I nodded, forced a smile, even teased him about it. But when I went home that night, I broke. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my chest hollow, my stomach twisted. The image of him with someone else played on repeat in my head. And no matter how much I tried to reason with myself, he never promised you anything, he never said he wanted more. It didn't matter, because it still hurt like hell. That was when it hit me. I wasn't just catching feelings anymore. I was drowning in them. And yet I stayed. People ask why. Why keep putting yourself through that? Why let yourself be strung along when you know how it ends? The truth is, when someone makes you feel alive in ways no one else ever has, you'll take whatever pieces of them they're willing to give. And he gave me pieces. Just enough to keep me there. He'd call me first when he got good news. He'd show up at my door with beers after a long day, saying he just wanted to hang out. He'd hug me longer than necessary, his hand pressing into my back like he didn't want to let go. Those little things, they were enough to convince me that maybe I wasn't imagining it all. That maybe, beneath his fear and his walls, he felt it too. But feelings you can't name are the hardest ones to carry. One night stands out more than the rest. We were lying on my bed, both of us exhausted after a long day. He was on his phone, scrolling mindlessly, while I just watched him. His hair was messy, his t-shirt wrinkled, his face relaxed in a way I didn't see often. I don't know what possessed me, but I whispered it. "I think I'm falling for you." It slipped out like a confession I couldn't hold in any longer. And for a second, just 1 second, he froze. His eyes flicked to mine, wide and startled. Then he laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly. Just nervously. "Don't," he said quickly. "Don't." As if feelings were a choice. As if I hadn't already fallen. The silence that followed was unbearable. He changed the subject. I let him. But inside, something cracked. Because I realized then, it wasn't that he didn't know how I felt. He knew. He had always known. He just didn't want to carry it with me. After that, things shifted. Subtly, but enough for me to notice. He pulled back a little. Still around, still texting, still showing up at my place. But there was a distance now, a line drawn in the sand. And I knew I had been the one to force it. I told myself maybe it was for the best. Maybe creating that space would help me get over him. Maybe I could finally breathe again. But the truth? I didn't want to get over him. Because even with the hurt, even with the distance, he was still the person I wanted most in the world. And losing him, even as a friend, terrified me more than anything. So I stayed. Still. Because sometimes, loving someone means accepting the scraps they're willing to give, even if it leaves you starving. There's a cruelty in half-love. Not the kind that's deliberate or malicious, but the quiet, unspoken cruelty of being given just enough to stay but never enough to be full. And the thing about him is, he wasn't bad to me. If he had been cruel outright, maybe it would have been easier. Maybe I could have cut the cord and walked away. But he wasn't. He was kind, thoughtful, present in all the ways that made it impossible to let go. He just couldn't love me back. One memory still haunts me. It was late summer. One of those nights where the air is heavy but the world feels wide open. We went driving with no destination, windows down, music spilling out into the warm night. He was in the passenger seat, singing off-key to every song, laughing at himself. And I thought, this is it. This is what love is supposed to feel like. We ended up at some empty lookout point, city lights spread beneath us. He leaned back against the hood of the car, hands behind his head, and said, "Sometimes I think about just disappearing, you know? Just leaving everything and starting fresh." I asked him where he'd go. He shrugged. "Anywhere, as long as it's far away." And then, God, I still feel the sting of it. He looked at me and said, "You'd come with me, right?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to scream it. But instead, I just laughed and said something stupid like, "Who else would keep you out of trouble?" He grinned, satisfied, and turned back to the lights. He'll never know that in that moment, if he had asked me seriously, I would have gone anywhere with him. No questions asked. But that's the problem with loving someone who doesn't love you back. You live in maybes and what-ifs. You build entire futures out of words they don't even realize are heavy. And the weight of it wears you down. The more time passed, the more I realized I wasn't just hurting. I was changing. I was becoming smaller, bending myself into whatever shape would keep him close. Laughing at jokes that cut too deep, swallowing jealousy when he talked about other guys, pretending I was fine when I was breaking apart inside. Because if I admitted the truth, if I said out loud how much I loved him, how much it was tearing me apart, I was afraid I'd lose him completely. And I wasn't ready for that. So I kept quiet. I kept loving him in silence. Then came the night everything cracked wide open. He showed up at my door drunk. Not tipsy, not buzzing, drunk. His eyes glassy, his words slurred, shoulders slumped like he was carrying the weight of the world. I helped him inside, got him water, sat with him on the couch. He leaned into me, his head on my chest, his arm around me like I was the only thing holding him together. And then he whispered it. "I don't know what I'd do without you." It broke me, because I wanted to believe he meant it the way I felt it. I wanted to believe that maybe, finally, he was letting his guard down. That maybe I wasn't the only one drowning. So when he lifted his head, when his face was suddenly inches from mine, I let myself believe. I kissed him, just once. Soft, hesitant, filled with everything I had been holding back. For a second, just a second, he kissed me back. His lips moved against mine. His hand gripped my shirt, and I thought, this is it. This is the moment everything changes. But then he pulled away, his eyes wide, his breath uneven. "We can't," he said, shaking his head. "We can't do this." And that was it. He got up, muttered something about needing air, and left me sitting there with my heart in pieces. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened. He showed up with coffee, cracked a joke, smiled that same easy smile. And I, pathetic, desperate me, I let him. I pretended too, because pretending meant I still had him. Pretending meant I didn't lose the only thing I couldn't bear to lose. But inside I knew. The line had been crossed, and nothing would ever really be the same. In the weeks that followed, I tried to convince myself to move on. I threw myself into work, into friends, into anything that wasn't him. But every time my phone buzzed and his name appeared, I was right back where I started. Because how do you walk away from someone who feels like home, even when they're the very thing breaking you? I told myself I just needed time, that the feelings would fade, that eventually I'd stop aching every time I saw him. But they didn't fade. If anything, they grew sharper, more desperate. Because love that isn't returned doesn't wither. It festers. One night, I finally broke. We were sitting on my porch, beers in hand, the quiet hum of the city around us. And I just couldn't hold it in anymore. "I can't do this," I blurted. He frowned. "Do what?" "This. Me pretending I'm okay with being just your friend when I'm not. When I haven't been for a long time." The words hung between us, heavy and unmovable. He didn't say anything right away, just looked at me, his jaw tight, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't name. Finally, he said softly, "I told you not to catch feelings." And I laughed, bitter, broken, as if I had a choice. That was the moment I realized I had to choose myself. Because as much as I loved him, as much as he meant to me, I couldn't keep tearing myself apart just to keep him close. And walking away, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But sometimes, love isn't about holding on. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let go. Walking away wasn't one clean break. It never is. People talk about letting go like it's a single moment, like you wake up one morning and decide, "I'm done," and that's the end of it. But it's not. It's 1,000 little moments of choosing yourself over someone else. And every single one of them hurts. The first time I didn't answer his text right away. The first time I turned down an invitation to hang out. The first time I went a whole day without reaching for my phone, without waiting for his name to light up the screen. Felt like tearing out pieces of myself one by one. But even in the distance, he was everywhere. I'd hear a song we used to drive to and feel my throat tighten. I'd pass the bar we used to haunt and my chest would ache. Every corner of my life had his fingerprints on it. And the worst part was, he noticed. A week after I started pulling away, he showed up at my place. No warning, just knocked on the door until I answered. He stood there, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes searching mine. "What's going on with you?" he asked. I wanted to tell him everything. That I couldn't keep loving him from the sidelines. That I couldn't keep pretending I was okay. That I was breaking apart every time he smiled at me like I was his safe place, when all I wanted was to be his everything. But instead, I just shook my head. "I just need some space." He frowned. "From me?" And God, the way he said it, like the thought of me needing distance was unthinkable. Like he had no idea the power he held over me. "Yes," I whispered. "From you." He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, like he was trying to understand something he couldn't quite grasp. And then he left. That night, I cried harder than I had in years, because pushing him away felt like ripping out my own heart. But deep down, I knew it was the only way. Days turned into weeks. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for my phone, my fingers hovering over his name, but I wouldn't press it. Couldn't. And then, one night, weeks later, he broke the silence. A text. "Can I come over?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Every part of me screamed yes. But the part of me that had been learning to breathe again whispered no. "What for?" I finally typed back. I miss you." 2 little words, and all my resolve crumbled. Because that was all I ever wanted. To be missed by him, to matter enough that my absence hurt. So I said yes. When he showed up, he looked different. Not in the way he dressed or carried himself, but in his eyes. Tired. Heavy. Like he'd been carrying something too long. We sat on the couch in silence at first. Neither of us knew where to start. Finally, he said quietly, "Things don't feel right without you." And just like that, hope came roaring back. That dangerous, destructive hope. "Then why—" My voice cracked. "Why can't we just be together?" He closed his eyes, rubbed the back of his neck. "Because I don't know how." It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. And in that moment, I understood. It wasn't that he didn't care about me. He did. Maybe more than he wanted to admit. But caring and loving, they're not the same thing. And even if he felt something for me, it wasn't enough. Not the way I needed it to be. He was afraid. Afraid of what it meant. Afraid of what it would cost him. Afraid of facing a truth he wasn't ready for. And no matter how much I loved him, I couldn't fight his battles for him. I could stand beside him. I could hold his hand. I could love him until my heart gave out. But I couldn't make him choose me. That had to come from him. And it never did. So that night I told him goodbye. Not the kind of goodbye where you slam doors and scream words you can't take back. But the kind where you sit across from someone you love more than anything, and you realize love isn't enough. I can't do this anymore, I whispered. His eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean, I can't keep being yours halfway. I can't keep giving you everything when you won't give me the same in return. I love you, but it's destroying me. He stared at me for a long time, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. And then, finally, he nodded. I'm sorry, he said. It was the only thing he could say. That was the last time I saw him. At least in the way I wanted to. We crossed paths after that, mutual friends, random run-ins. But it was never the same. There was a wall between us now, one I built to protect myself. And yet, even with all the pain, even with all the heartbreak, I don't regret loving him. Because he taught me something. He taught me that love isn't about holding on to someone who can't meet you where you are. It's about knowing when to let go. It's about choosing yourself, even when it feels impossible. I still think of him sometimes. Certain songs, certain places, they bring him back in flashes. And for a moment I feel that ache again. But it doesn't consume me the way it used to. Because now I know what I deserve. I deserve someone who doesn't tell me not to catch feelings. Someone who meets me in the middle. Who doesn't make me beg for scraps of love. Someone who wants me as much as I want them. And maybe that's the hopeful part of all this. Because if I could love the wrong person this deeply, imagine how it will feel when it's finally right. Healing didn't come quickly. For months after, I felt hollow. Like I had left pieces of myself with him that I couldn't get back. I would wake up some mornings reaching for my phone, half expecting a message from him. Other mornings, I'd dream of him so vividly that I woke up with his name on my lips. And every time that happened, I had to remind myself, he wasn't mine. He never had been. The hardest part wasn't the silence. It wasn't the empty space where he used to be. The hardest part was retraining my heart not to see him in everything. Because love leaves traces. The coffee shop where we used to sit for hours, laughing over nothing. The stretch of road where we drove with the windows down, the music too loud. The hoodie he left behind one night, folded in the back of my closet because I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It's strange how love lingers in the small things long after the person is gone. But little by little, I started to rebuild. I started saying yes to friends again, not just to fill the silence, but because I wanted to. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned when my world revolved around him. I took long walks alone and let myself breathe in the quiet without wishing he was beside me. And slowly, the world began to feel less heavy. I began to see myself again, not as the guy who loved him, but as someone whole on his own. Someone worthy of a love that wasn't complicated, wasn't conditional, wasn't halfway. It's a cliché, I know. But clichés are clichés for a reason. Because they're true. Healing isn't about forgetting the person you loved. It's about remembering yourself in the process. One evening, months later, I ran into him. It was at a grocery store of all places, under the harsh fluorescent lights, both of us holding baskets full of things we probably didn't need. For a moment, it was like no time had passed. He smiled that same smile, the one that had once undone me completely. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I replied. We stood there making small talk. How work was going. How mutual friends were doing. Nothing that mattered, not really. But when he looked at me, there was something in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or just recognition of what we once were, of what we could have been. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was breaking. For the first time, I could smile back without that ache in my chest. Because I realized I didn't need him anymore. It wasn't anger I felt. It wasn't bitterness. It was something softer. Gratitude, maybe, because even though it ended the way it did, even though I had to stitch myself back together piece by piece, he had given me something. He had shown me the depth of my own capacity to love. He had taught me that I was capable of giving myself fully, fiercely, unapologetically. And if I could love him like that, the wrong person, the almost but not quite, then I knew I would love the right person even more. People sometimes ask if I regret it. If I regret letting myself fall so hard for someone who couldn't catch me. If I regret staying when I knew he couldn't give me what I needed. If I regret wasting time on something that was never going to be. And my answer is always the same: no. Because love, even unrequited, is never wasted. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it left scars. But it also left me with stories, with memories, with a clearer understanding of what I deserve. It made me braver, even if I didn't feel brave at the time. And one day, when I find the person who looks at me without fear, without hesitation, when I find the person who wants me just as much as I want them, I'll know how to love them fully. Because I practiced on him. I think about that night sometimes. The one where he laughed and said, "Don't catch feelings." I think about how he said it so casually, like it was nothing, like it was just a joke. And I wonder if he ever realized the weight of those words. If he ever understood that by the time he said them, it was already too late. I had caught feelings. I had fallen. I had loved him in a way that terrified me. And maybe that's what scared him the most. That kind of love, raw and consuming, is too much for someone who isn't ready to receive it. But me, I'll never apologize for the way I loved him. Because love is never the mistake. The mistake is thinking we should be ashamed of it. So if you've ever loved someone who didn't love you back, if you've ever been told not to catch feelings when your heart was already gone, hear me when I say this: you are not foolish. You are not weak. You are not unworthy because someone couldn't choose you. Your love was real. It mattered. And one day, someone will see it for what it is. Not something to run from, not something to fear, but something to treasure. And when that day comes, you'll realize why it never worked out with anyone else. Because love isn't meant to be begged for. It isn't meant to be rationed out in scraps. It isn't meant to be halfway. Love is meant to be whole. So here's what I carry with me now. Yes, he told me not to catch feelings. Yes, he never chose me. Yes, it broke me for a while. But I healed. I grew. And most importantly, I didn't stop believing in love. Because love, in all its messiness and heartbreak, is still the most beautiful thing we have. And one day, I'll find the kind of love that doesn't tell me not to catch feelings, because it will already be catching them with me.